We pledge ourselves to you, the frame maker, the scarab, a world for us to love you in, a cloak of dirt to cherish, betrayed by your ancestors when you were not even looking. With the foundation of time came the genesis of variation. Time provided the many aspects of the orbis with structure, a celestial skeleton to form themselves around. This was the beginning of innovation and endless possibility. But there was one aspect who marched to the beat of his own drum, one spirit who felt deep in his dark heart that something vital was missing. A shepherd needs a flock, and what use is a sphere of influence when there is no one to succumb to it? As these aspects discovered their glorious natures, they revelled in their unsullied magnificence. They were divine, but this divergent spirit loomed in the periphery, and where all is pure, the slightest taint is all the more striking. The drum continued to beat out of sync, and ever susceptible to curiosity, the original spirits gathered to hear his strange song. This starlight spirit stood alone before the Atada, and attuning to the rhythm of his heart, cantillated the verses of his mythos. In the newly formed minds of the gods he displayed a world of their collaboration, one in which all who partook would be eternally venerated, a place where things lived and breathed and acted of their own free will. In this symphony, each composer could manifest their wildest imaginings. The orchestrator was named Lorcan, and this spirit was the spawn of Sithis, Padamaic in nature and full of limitation. Or that is what they would have you believe. Was this scheme contrived merely to trick the original spirits? Or was it actually as brilliant as the song he crooned at that first meeting? That's not for us mortals to know, but what we do know is that many Atada were enraptured by Lorcan's proposition, and the composition would be known as Mundus, the mortal realm. Mundus was the soul of the orbis, a place where the aspects of aspects might even be allowed to self-reflect. Upon its creation, those aspects of Anu and Padamai found purchase in a tangible realm, made from their own power. In that moment they became the Atada, original spirits, ancestors. But there was one thing these gods loved more than their wondrous creation, and that was their own power. In the dawn times, the Atada felt themselves weakening, as if they were turning mortal. Suddenly, these immortal beings were faced with existential dread. The force of time that had provided them with so many possibilities was now promising their demise. Chaos seeped into the Mundus. The prospect of limitation was too much to bear, and the Aedra began to flee. Magnus and the Magnagi escaped in time, but most did not. Auriel pleaded with Anu, but the way was closed. Some of the Atada transformed themselves into the Earthbones, so that the Mundus would never die, but others, led by Auriel and his champion Trinimac, swore vengeance against Lorcan and the treacherous tune he had chanted to them in Ephirius. Auriel's chosen mortals warred against Lorcan's, but the outcome was always the same. The drum that beat by its own rhythm was doomed. Trinimac ripped Lorcan's heart from his chest and presented it to Auriel, who fastened it to an arrow and let it fly along into the sea. Lorcan was sundered, but his realm would endure, forever destined to march to the beat of the doomed drum. A great many new concepts were established in this song, but beneath every verse there is betrayal. Every line resonates with deceit. To some, the victims of this betrayal were the gods who were beguiled by Lorcan's promises. But to others, the betrayal came later, when those same gods scorned their own splendid creation and punished Lorcan, usurping the Mundus from him. Whichever way you look at it, deception is pervasive in the story of creation. But this dichotomy between those who support Auriel and those who support Lorcan shaped every aspect of Tamriel, and it is at the core of every culture on Nirn. In the Malefic era, aptly named the Era of the Elves after Nordic translation, there was a great disparity between those who sided with Auriel's account of creation and those who sided with Lorcan's. The missing god had no advocates among the Aldmer of Somerset, but there was one god who was appalled by the lies of the Aedra. This god modelled themselves after Lorcan, taking plots, deception and betrayal as their sphere. This god loved Lorkhan and would use their sphere to avenge him. It is this god who uttered the words, "We pledge ourselves to you, the frame maker, the scarab, a world for us to love you in, a cloak of dirt to cherish, betrayed by your ancestors when you were not even looking." This god is Boethiah, and as the Aedra sundered Lorkhan, she would in turn sunder them. Hey guys, it's Drew here, and welcome back to Fudge Muppet. I feel compelled to slot an introductory line into every video, but I can't help feeling like it sometimes completely interrupts the story, so I won't waste any more time. We know the story of Boethiah in Trinimac, and the origins of the Chimera who would become the Dark Elves. But today I want to attack this story from a different angle, to find Boethiah's triangled truth, and determine why the Prince of Plots chose to create the Chimera in the first place. Was her plot to deceive Trinimac purely the manifestation of her sphere, or was there a greater motive at play? Boethiah's cruel humiliation of Trinimac was fueled by love, not spite. Let's continue the story. Before the various diasporas to mainland Tamriel, when the Aldmer dwelt in Somerset, there was a uniformity to their spiritual beliefs. Considering that the gods walked among the elves in those early Malefic times, it makes sense. How could you deny Auriel and Trinimac's teachings when those original spirits strode the land, mantled in beatific splendour? The Aldmer would ritually gather to hear the sermons of the Aedra, and Trinimac was perhaps the most beloved of all, for he was Auriel's champion, the trickster's bane, the paragon of strength, honour and unity. In these elder days, the Daedra lords who did not participate in creation could only watch and rue their inaction, for they were not loved by the people. Boethiah is known to some as the fount of inspiration, for he inspires the arms of mortals into action. Well, Boethiah's plot would soon inspire the greatest dissident movement in Aldmeri history. She was revolted by Trinimac's conceit and his pride in betraying Mundus's true master. So she conspired to ruin Trinimac with the same mouth that proclaimed his supremacy. Trinimac and his priests fooled the Aldmeri into thinking that tears were the best response to the sundering. They even took the missing god's name in vain, calling his narratives into question. Lorkhan may have been unable to defend himself from such Anuic slander, but Boethiah could. So one day Boethiah, Prince of Plots, precocious youth, tricked Trinimac to go into his mouth. Boethiah talked like Trinimac for a while then, and gathered enough people to listen to him. Boethiah showed them the lies of the Atada, the Aedra, and told them Trinimac was the biggest liar of all, saying all this with Trinimac's own voice. Boethiah told the mass before him the triangled truth. He showed them, with Mafala, the rules of Sigic endeavour. He taught them how to build houses, and what items they needed to bury in the corners. He demonstrated the right way to wear their skin. He performed the way to walk to achieve an exodus. Then Boethiah relieved himself of Trinimac, right there on the ground before them, to prove all the things he said were the truth. It was easy then for his new people to become the changed ones. What remained of Trinimac after his tormented journey through the bowels of Boethiah was a husk of his former glory. His angelic appearance was malformed and twisted into something hideous. He was banished from Dawn's beauty to a realm where anguish and broken promises hung heavy in the air like ash, and all who breathed it suffocated. Trinimac was no longer the god of strength, honour and unity in the eyes of the gathered masses. He was now the corrupted prince of curses, outcasts and scorn. Malakath was born from an act of vengeance, and thus revenge was now intrinsic to his sphere. Malakath teaches his flock the blood price, so that no betrayal may ever go unpunished. In avenging Lorkhan, Boethiah created the Changed Ones. The Chimera people, whether the good Daedra told them explicitly or not, were the product of Boethiah's love for Lorkhan. They were an eternal physical reminder of a debt repaid, of a Padamic victory over the Anuic. According to Sermon 10 of Vivek's Lessons, Boethiah bestowed this guidance upon Veloth and the Chimera. These are her words verbatim. "Shift ye in your skin, I say to the Trinimac eaters. Pitch your voices into the colour of bruise. Divide ye like your enemies in houses, and lay your laws in set sequence from the centre, again like the enemy corners of the House of Troubles. And see yourself thence as timber, or mud slats, or sheets of resin. Then do not divide, for yet is the stride of Siphis quicker than the rush of enemies, and he will sunder the whole for the sake of a shingle. Boethiah, along with Mephala and Azura, taught the Chimera how to live in a way that honoured Lorkhan and the Psijic endeavour. This went against everything the Aedra of Somerset had preached. While they were leading the Oldmer to self-pity and tears over the trap of Tamriel, the good Daedra were showing the Chimera how to overcome the test of mortality, how to love every facet of Lorkhan's creation, even the tests and travails. Boethiah proceeds to justify these new rules for living by condemning Anu and the Aedra. She says, "For we go different, and in thunder. Siphis is the start of all true houses, built against stasis and lazy slaves. Turn from your predilections, broken like false maps. Move and move like this. Quicken against false fathers, mothers left in corners weeping for glass and rain. Stasis asks merely for nothing, for itself, which is nothing, as you were in the 8 everlasting imperfections." This is Boethiah's endorsement for Padamai, Siphis, Lorkhan. In the beginning there was Anu and Padamai, stasis and change. For the original spirits there was nature and limitation. Auriel and Trinimac denounced Lorkhan as being more of a limit than a nature, but here Boethiah taught the Chimera that without limit there is nothing. Stasis unchallenged is devoid of life. Equilibrium is perfectly balanced. Thus no free will can exist within it. Chaos is the true life giver. Auriel and Trinimac were here to kill chaos, but Boethiah said no. Boethius Sigil is an upraised fist and a coiled serpent. This sigil is a metaphor for his mission to avenge and uphold the legacy of Lorkhan. In most Anuic religions, Lorkhan takes the form of a snake. Sometimes this is metaphorical, as he is a snake in the grass, a deceiver. To the Yakudans this is quite literal, as to them Lorkhan is Sep, the second serpent, made from the detritus of past world skins. So the snake in Boethiah's emblem is Lorkhan, and the upraised fist is a clear enough symbol to any who see it. It represents revolution, insurrection. There is some crossover between Boethiah's sphere and Dagon's, as Boethiah is more than just the patron of warriors. He is the prince of plots and deceiver of nations for a reason. When we think of sedition, we think of Mehrunes Dagon, yet Boethiah may encompass this aspect of rebellion even more than the razor. Sedition is the use of speech that incites people to rebel against authority, and this is precisely what she did when she spoke with Trinimac's own voice. If you've ever wondered why Boethiah is associated with inspiration, ambition and destruction, traits normally reserved for Dagon, then you now know why. It's also no coincidence that St. Velof's exodus took the Chimera to Morrowind, or Resdain as it was known in those days. Much of Tamriel was ripe for the plucking in the Malefic era, but Boethiah chose the northeast, where the land was harsh, and while not confirmed, it was also likely populated by the Dwemer at this time, a foe that most newly budding civilizations would want to avoid. But to Boethiah, it was the only true home for her new children. The Chimera traversed the full diameter of Tamriel, just as Lorkhan's still-beating heart did when it was shot from Auriel's bow. Resdain was the resting place of the Doom Drum, the most Padamaic corner of Tamriel, and the Chimera would be the guardians of Lorkhan's heart, for the gold-skinned elves were his progeny, made by Boethiah in his honour. Perhaps Boethiah anticipated that the Dwemer would seek to meddle with Lorkhan's heart, and sent the Chimera to prevent this. But even if not, Morrowind was the only home for the Changed Ones. The challenges faced by the Chimera in Resdain were crucial to the Psijic endeavour, for mortality was a test, and the four corners of the troubled house were important pieces in this worldview. But this choice to occupy Tamriel's northeast was not without reward. The Chimera grew affluent on the abundance of ebony in the region, and even this fact can be traced back to Lorkhan, for this rare volcanic glass is the crystallized blood of the missing god. With this in mind, it's also no surprise that the good Daedra have multiple artifacts made from Lorkhan's blood. Of course, most Daedric artifacts are technically made from ebony, as Daedric equipment is merely ebony infused with a Daedric essence. Nevertheless, ebony artifacts like the ebony mail and the ebony blade are important to the good Daedra. Lorkhan is the spirit of Nirn, and whether you see him as a creator, a trickster, a tester, or all at once, There is no denying that he is the orchestrator of the mortal realm. Tamriel is his song, and the crescendo of this composition took the form of his betrayal. He tricked the original spirits, and in turn, they sundered him. In his absence, Boethiah took up the mantle as the god of plots and betrayal, avenged Lorkhan, and created a race of elves in his honour. The Nords are often the race most closely associated with Lorkhan, or Shor as they would call him, but I say the Kaima, who are now the Dunmer, are in fact Lorkhan's true people. Ironically, despite being known by most cultures of Tamriel as the god of men, Lorkhan's most devout followers are in fact elves. And this was all Boethiah's doing, because, by her own admission, she loved Lorkhan. I'll recite her words one last time. We pledge ourselves to you, the Framemaker, the Scarab, a world for us to love you in. Boethiah loved Lorkhan because without him, her sphere of influence would not exist, and subsequently, neither would the fundaments of Kaima culture. Over the years, my choice for favourite Daedric Prince has shifted between a few. Malakath and Boethiah have always been major contenders, but I think I can say with certainty now that Boethiah is the champion. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. Once again, my name is Drew, you've been watching Fudge Muppet, and I'll see you in the next one.